probably album. That's been in the same pot for probably 10, 12 years. It's in quite a big pot. The pot is about 18 inches diameter. But I top dress it every year. I've got various shrubs. I've got a little bay tree. I've got conifers that have been in pots for donkey's years.
Is there anything that really doesn't get on well in a pot?
For some reason, pulmonarias don't seem to be happy in pots for very long.
Oh, that's weird.
Don't really know why. Some things that run, like the classic thing is for people to recommend that you grow mint in a pot to stop it running all over your garden. I think some things run because they use up the nutrients they want really quickly and need to move on somewhere else. And so things like that and Euphorbia griffithii, Dixter, they'll run to the edge of the pot and then they'll stand there all round the edge of the pot looking out, going, help, let me out.
Trying to make a bid for freedom.
So you're just constantly having to chop those in half and repot them and fiddle about with them.
Yeah.
And so I get annoyed with those.
So if you're like me and you aren't prepared to put too much work in, or say somebody said to me, oh, what if I've got a holiday home? What am I going to put in the containers there? And actually I do rent my place out. And so in the summer, I might not be able to get here for a week to water, which is a disaster for most of the stuff I've got. But if you were to not be around too much or not wanting to put the effort in, what would be a good thing to put in your containers, if anything?
Well, containers aren't really the low maintenance option. But if, for example, you wanted something that you didn't have to water all summer, then go for succulents. Things that like desert conditions pretty much, or at least will put up with them. And if you're looking around the garden centre, look for things that are drought tolerant. But succulents you can leave for an entire British summer without needing to water because they'll get enough rain. But most things will require at least a little bit of water, depending on how big they are. But if you're just going away temporarily, there are things, there are strategies. So, for example, I've got a ridiculous number of pots, but that's just because it's me and because I've got a backyard that's very ugly without any plants in it. So I need to have lots of pots. At least that's what I tell my husband.
I was going to say, that's your excuse and you're sticking to it.
But I have learned over the years that plants will do much better if you keep the pots in groups, because they shelter each other from the wind, they shelter each other from the sun, even to a certain extent from the frost in the winter. So grouping works all year round, but they definitely lose water much less quickly if they're in groups. Again, it's about getting the right plant in the right place as well. But what you can do, if you're just going away temporarily and you want to give your plants the best chance of surviving, if it can be cut back without destroying it or without chopping off all the future flowers, then cut it back before you go, because the more leaves it's got, the more water it's going to use. So I've found cutting back can really help if you're just going on holiday. The other thing is mulching. Mulching really helps, so you're not losing water from the surface of the compost. I don't always need to mulch because I tend to plant pretty densely in most of my pots anyway, so the surface of the compost tends to be covered. Mm-hmm. But if it's not covered, then mulch it with bark chips or pebbles or whatever your preferred mulch is, and move your pots to the shade, because containers, they are movable. So if you're going away, doesn't matter if they're all crammed together, put them somewhere shady and sheltered from the wind. And the other thing is just be nice to your neighbours.
Yeah, that's it. And you were talking about the wood lice and the slugs and everything that you get at the bottom of pots. Again, that's a problem that I've got in my garden. They do tend to lurk under the pots, even on my gravel driveway. So what are some of the pests that you might come across with your pots? And what are some of the things that you can do about them? I've probably got two culprits mainly in mind, but you might have some more.
Okay, well, talking of wood lice, a lot of people ask me about wood lice and ants. I get a lot of ants in the garden, but I don't get a lot in my pots, and I think it's because I keep the pots relatively well watered. They don't dry out. I'm not absolutely sure of that.
And are the ants doing anything detrimental anyway?
No, although they can kind of hollow out areas around some roots, which can make your plants suffer a little bit, but I've never really noticed a problem with it myself. And the same with woodlice. I don't really think woodlice are causing a problem. I mean, they tend to be eating dead material. They're not really eating your live plants.
No, I really don't have a problem with woodlice.
But the thing that everybody asks about is vine weevils. And I do get vine weevils here. They come out of my succulents in the spring, and I can find them walking about in the house, which is really annoying.
Oh, I know. They've got a bit of a penchant for coming in the house. I don't know what that's all about.
Yeah, well, they're such good climbers. They just walk. They just keep walking.
Yeah, march straight in.
They can end up anywhere. I found one on my ironing board once.
Oh, for God's sakes. They do get everywhere.
I don't have too much, touch wood, of a problem with them in my pots because I tend not to grow the plants they like the best. They love heucheras. They love primulas. There are some succulents they really love, which upsets me because they always destroy my favourite succulents.
Oh, that's gutting. And strawberries, they're a bit fond of strawberries, aren't they? I find.
Yeah, they can be. I grew strawberries in a hanging basket last year, and it was really, really good, actually. You know, I mean, obviously you don't get vast quantities, but they looked nice. They were those pink flowered strawberries.
Yeah, they're lovely.
And certainly vine weevil didn't seem to get to them there. But yeah, vine weevil, again, it's down to observation. If you know what plants they're likely to get, then have a look at those and just observe them. Sedums, Hylotelethium, it's called. They go for those in my pots. So I tend to look at those, and sometimes you'll find that the roots have been destroyed, but they've made you some nice cuttings on the top. You've just got like shoots on the top with no roots. So if you're quick, you can get those in and just have more plants. But plants that are liable to get attacked by vine weevils, when I buy them, I quite often wash all the compost off their roots because they're either full of vine weevil eggs or they're full of pesticide. So I quite often wash all the compost off and just plant them almost like a bare root plant. I mean, I repot the vast majority of my plants at least once a year anyway, so they don't like that disturbance. Well, the other thing is, at this time of year and during the summer, if you've got things like, I've got some quite dense conifers and evergreens and so on, during the day, because they go marching about at night, but during the day they'll be roosting in things like that. So sometimes I'll, especially if I'm doing some repotting or planting or whatever, I'll tip the pot sideways and give the conifer a really good shake. I mean, I've got a concrete yard, so it's fairly pale. So shake it, and you'll find that a couple of vine weevils will fall out, and you can step on those and they make a lovely crunching sound.
Yuck. I just lob them over the fence and then they'll probably come marching back that same
really
night.
They're really hard to throw, actually, because they're so grippy.
That's true, actually. Yeah, they get, especially if they're on your clothes, they won't come off for love nor money. They are horrible little things.
They make an excellent brooch.
Yeah. Oh, God. There was probably one more pest I was thinking about, and it wasn't slugs, actually.
Slugs, snails, aphids. People sometimes have trouble with aphids in pots because their plants are getting too dry, basically.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And aphids will go for things that are under water stress, or they'll do better on things that are under water stress. Slugs and snails are quite easy because it's quite easy to find them when they're roosting, again, during the day. So if you're being very good and checking your pots at least once a week and you see slug or snail damage on, say, your hostas, if you find damage on the plant in a pot, it's quite often just one slug or one snail. So the slug will be roosting on the inside of the rim quite often. So if you just run your finger around the inside of the rim of the pot, then you can find the snail on the inside of the rim. Whereas the slug's favourite roosting spot is under the pot in the drainage hole. So quite often I can be found just tipping my pot slightly and running my hand underneath the pot. And I've got a lot less squeamish about picking slugs up.
You must be like Muscles McGee, the amount you throw your pots around. It's no mean feat
considering a
picking some
lot
of these
of them are
pots
heavy
up.
terracotta ones.
Yeah.
I do. I have the dodgy back to show for it.
Oh, yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, it's not for everyone, is it, this container planting game?
No, I mean, I've got about 300 on the go at the
Oh,
moment,
my
which is
God.
far too many.
It's a lot, yeah.
And yet I keep acquiring more.
Yeah,
It's a terrible addiction.
I was going to say I didn't like to mention the addiction word, but I think there might be like a container planters anonymous springing up in your vicinity.
Oh, one more thing with slugs and snails, particularly, is if you've got plastic pots or pots with rims that curl over.
Right.
Just run your finger around underneath the rim there, because the snails will congregate in there.
Right.
So and then you can do what you like with them.
Basically.
You can lob them over to the neighbours, or I tend to take mine to retire on the compost heap. So
I take mine for a little walk just down the lane. It's fine. They're all right. No,
it gives a hedgehog something to eat.
Exactly. I'm doing my bit for hedgehogs. Actually, what I was thinking of, the one that I have the most problem with, particularly with bulbs, is our delightful squirrel friends.
Oh, God, squirrels, yes. Our squirrels haven't got quite brave enough to come up to the house yet, which is where most of the bulbs are planted. We do have mice which come and get the bulbs if I'm not careful. And I find with both squirrels and mice, the best barrier over your bulbs is a good layer of grit, or even pebbles, actually. If you've got super strong mice, which we seem to get this year, I kind of went up the gauges of gravel, because there was one particular mouse, I think, that seemed to be getting... It found my crocuses, and it burrowed through a little bit of grit I'd put on. So then I put more grit, and it slowed down a bit, but it was still doing it. So then I put bigger pebbles, and that stopped it.
Till it gets strong again, so it does a bit of weightlifting.
It's a bit like when you're trying to discourage burglars, you just got to make it harder for them to get to your valuable crocuses. So they're more likely to be disturbed or eaten by predators, hopefully.
That's a really good tip, actually. I've tried putting chicken wire over the container, which did work, but I packed my bulbs really in tightly, and some of them got a little bit kind of crumpled because they couldn't push their way out through the wire, so it wasn't foolproof by any means.
Yes, you end up with diced tulips.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal, but that's a really good tip. I shall try that.
But the plants will come up quite easily through pebbles that are about an inch in diameter even. The layer of gravel or grit's got to be about, an inch deep, really.
And that might even help with the slugs, but you never know, I suppose.
Yeah, it helps with slugs too.
This is my final question, I think. What are some of your favourite ever planting combinations, especially when you've worked in public gardens? What are guaranteed to just draw gasps of amazement from visitors?
It's difficult. It changes all the time. Some plants that you think won't get any attention suddenly is like the plant of the year. And other things you can be massively pleased with and nobody seems to notice. But there are certain plants which are quite reliable for getting a good reaction. Aeonium arboreum Schwarzkopf, the big black succulent, people always want to know what that is. And that is a plant that is really useful because you can combine it with all sorts of things. Aeoniums, they don't seem to mind being watered along with all the normal summer plants that you would put in a container, things like, salvias and all the bedding plants. So they make a really good, strong rosette that anchors your planting and stops it from being too fluffy. So strong-looking plants like that are really helpful to stop your planting from just being a big fluffy blob, Things like Ricinus New Zealand purple with its big purple leaves, that's very striking.
Mm-hmm.
Things with big, strong-looking, bold leaves. The fun bit about container gardening is that you can indulge your whims and your moods because it's temporary gardening, basically. Most of it is temporary.
Yes, most of your container planting is temporary, so go for it. Have some fun this year. It's the perfect place to experiment, and as Adrian said in our episode on daffodils, it's a brilliant way to trial things before you let them loose in your gardens. One thing we didn't talk about was growing edibles in containers, and as that's a topic all on its own, I thought I'd dedicate an episode to just that in the future. And if you'd like to get hold of Harriet's book, The Cotswold Wildlife Park, A Celebration of the Gardens, you can